Good evening, I'm Alex Tremaine, and this evening Old Man continues to build the Master Grade Full Armour Unicorn Gundam. It's been a little while since I've been online due to changing the stream schedule from Sundays and Thursdays to Tuesdays and Thursdays. Hopefully that'll work slightly better for the whole process. Getting into it, the previous stream is still available as a VOD. It's not made it to YouTube yet due to reasons, but it will be up on YouTube fairly shortly, as will this stream after the fact. You can find link to the YouTube channel in the Twitch channel description. You will find on the YouTube channel a playlist with all the streams of the previous build, which was the real grade new Gundam, including the HWS expansion kit. You can follow me on Twitter at TremaineAlex, and I post there to say when I'm going live. Any changes to the stream schedule will go out on the Twitter. I think that covers all of the pre-stream business, so let's get right into things. Sorry, just tweaking microphone so I'm not going to knock it during the build. Right, so last stream, which was last Thursday, finished the torso. And in the time since, I have done a little bit of panel lining. All of the build will be carried out on stream, but things like panel lining will be done off stream. So this has been panel lined. It's interesting in comparison to the real grade. There are less details to panel line, but it is what it is. So that's completed torso. I will be moving on to doing the miserable sticker process at some point on the torso off stream as well. And what I will be trying to do is keep I will try to sorry about that. I will be trying to keep up with the panel lining as we build. I will try and keep up with the panel lining and DACL sticker application as we go along. I make no promises that that's going to happen, but that's what I'm going to try and do. In the meantime, we're going to get straight into this with the head. So starting with A8. I hope you've all had a good weekend and a good beginning to the week. Mine has been not as bad as it could have been, which I'll take at the moment. C15 A8 H2, so H2. Yeah. Following on from last Thursday's stream, with all the anime nostalgia that that was being discussed, my lovely wife picked up a copy of the Tenchimoyo OVAs on Blu-ray. So we watched some of that over the weekend, and it was it's held up pretty well. I quite enjoyed it. I was a little worried that it was not going to be as good as I remembered it, but it's still pretty solid. Which was nice. We've only got the first two OVAs, so it's essentially what was available on VHS back in the day, which, you know, I was reasonably confident that those were that was good, you know. I know there have been continuations since then of Tenchimoyo, which I've heard mixed things about. Some people seem to think it's pretty solid. I've seen many others who think it's not so great. I'm curious to see it, just to see where they go with it at some point, but it's but I need to get through the rewatching the 2 seasons I've got. Which, you know, is no bad thing. They were good seasons. So, I don't know how far we're going to get with this today. Certainly going to get the head completed. Don't know what. Straight onto the arms from the head. We'll probably get. We might get an arm done. Maybe get started on a second arm. We'll see how things go. But yeah, it's always nice when something holds up, nostalgia-wise, you know. There's so many things that I've gone back to over the years that have actually turned out to just be bad, and I only thought they were good because I was young and stupid. And didn't know any better. I'm also hoping that the top-down camera will not be drifting into view of the face camera today. I think I've solved that problem due to the using the miracle of coat hangers. I've cannibalised a wire coat hanger to hopefully prevent that prevent that happening from now on. We'll see how well that holds up, but I'm pretty confident that that'll do the job. C15, so what's this? This is sprue D. I haven't got sprue C yet. I thought I'd got everything we needed. Nope, here we go. Apologies for all the crinkling there. Right, so sprue C, and we need C15, which is this. Put that here for the moment. So yeah, it's nice when nostalgia doesn't disappoint you. But never mind. I don't think that's going to be massively noticeable. Right, so this sits in here. Like so. And then, because life likes to fuck with us, we must go into the land of the fucking stickers. Right, so what are we doing here? This is apply the sticker to the eyes. You can probably just about see the outline of the eyes on the plastic there. This needs to live stickers indeed, Miss Temperance. I know you have a fondness for them, and apparently a fondness for me suffering. But I think this is, broadly speaking, gone into place quite nicely. Just try and make sure that these the little soft ends of the handles on these cutters are really good for squishing stickers into place in awkward angles, which is, you know, nice. Particularly on these metallic ones, where if you have a go at them too hard, you can scrape the metallic metallic finish off. Right. So if I then put that on there, that is only slightly off centre. There we go. Certainly once that's all together, it's not, it's going to be barely noticeable. Certainly I'm not in a position that I can fix that at this stage, so that's what we're going to be going with. Right, so that's that. Then we need H1, which, let's get that out of the way. H1 is here. That's good. So been a lot of talk this week about the release of the this 4-hour Snyder cut of the Justice League movie, and I'll be honest, I have seen neither the Snyder cut nor the theatrical cut. I will be equally honest in that the likelihood of me seeing either is pretty slim, but it's been there's been some interesting discussion around it, certainly. For context, I was an enormous DC Comics fanboy when I was younger, but I got into DC Comics with I went into comics late, really. It was after I went to university in the late 90s, and my introduction to comics in general was Neil Gaiman's Sandman, and then one of my friends introduced me to what was then coming out, which was the Grant Morrison JLA, and boy did I love that comic. I enjoyed the Mark Waid run that followed it. I enjoyed a goodly chunk of the Joe Kelly run, I want to say, that came after the Mark Waid run. Yeah, they were good comics. Now, I vaguely remember from, Right, so it's going to tell us to do some stickers several steps in the future, but I don't want to be doing that. I want to do it now when it's easier to get at these parts. So we're going to start with this one. Where was I? DC Comics. So yeah, I got into DC Comics through the Grant Morrison JLA in the 90s. It's a cracking series. It was a few stories in, I think, when I first read it. So, but a friend of mine had a whole bunch of single issues of it, and he lent me those, and so I got to enjoy that sort of heyday of the JLA with the White Martian plot line. I think Rock of Ages, to which I suspect I get the sense that the Justice League film owes a degree of influence too. Yeah, I loved the Morrison Justice League. I really did. Went off, and I'm one of those rare beings, a fan of the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern. I mean, it has its problems. The whole, it is the progenitor, the trope namer of the women in refrigerators trope, and that is, you know, not, that is a genuine issue, you know. But the later stuff in that run was pretty good, and a lot of the stuff around the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern, the stuff that he was in that wasn't necessarily the main title, was pretty good. So I loved that whole thing. I loved this idea of, I mean, I'd enjoyed sort of, I'd read a lot of Marvel comics prior to getting into DC. You know, it was not a oh, for God's sake, come on. Yeah, I'd read a fair bit of Marvel before getting into DC, and I still to this day enjoy Marvel, which is more than I can say about DC, sadly. It was shortly after, I think, it wasn't long after the Morrison JLA run finished, and and after the Wade and Kelly runs on JLA, when there was this big push towards bringing things back to the Silver Age. So they resurrected, but it started with, and I'm going to be fair here because I'm not a Hal Jordan fan, can't fucking stand Hal Jordan. He can just get into the sea, but the, 'cause, 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 ' H3. But the story where they brought him back as the Spectre, the story wasn't very good. Day of Judgment, I want to say, big old crossover event thing that were becoming popular in the 90s and have continued plaguing everything ever since. Day of Judgment was fine. It wasn't the best, but it was fine, and it ended up with Hal Jordan as a Spectre. But then there was actually the Hal Jordan Spectre comic series, and it was actually good. For the first time ever, I gave a shit about Hal Jordan, which I never had done previously. He was, you see those old Brave and the Bold comics with Hal Jordan and from the Silver Age, with Hal and Oliver Queen as Green Arrow, and it's like, with Hal being this authoritarian, and the conflict was always between Hal and his sort of police authoritarian mindset, and Oliver Queen with his more sort of at the time, I guess, leaning towards sort of he wasn't, because he wasn't really an anarchist. In fact, he wasn't even really. The character didn't ever really seem to be left wing. Even he was just a bit of a hippie, which is fine. But the problem with those two characters is that Hal Jordan's just dull as fuck, or he was dull as fuck until they destroyed his city and gave him all of the angst in the universe. At which point he became moderately interesting. I quite enjoyed. Don't get me wrong. I quite enjoyed. I enjoyed the concept of Hal Jordan going mad and stealing all the power rings and going off and being the being generally, evil. Parallax is great character design. Can't deny that the character design of Parallax is fucking awesome. He looks really good. But we need A2 and A3. But the as a character, he was just naff. Then they killed his entire city. He went evil. He became Parallax. That was kind of cool. I'll be honest. 0 Hour is not great, which is the crossover event they did for Hal losing his shit and going crackers. 0 Hour isn't great, but it does have some really good moments in it. And one of them, interestingly, is the moment the Spectre shows up, which, whilst I have absolutely no doubt is not any kind of deliberate future planning on their part, given how long it was before they brought him back as the Spectre. Looking back on it, it has some nice sort of thematic symmetry. And it was it was all right. And then they did bring him back as the Spectre later on, and they actually managed to make Hal Jordan interesting. They which I didn't think was possible at the time. But then there was all of this. I mean, the other problem, of course, with all the Brave and the Bold stuff is that Oliver Queen is a fucking asshole. So hero or not, I could never get on with Oliver Queen because he was just the worst, basically. Never understood really why he was so popular, but is what it is. I liked Connor Hawke, who was acting Green Arrow when I was first getting into comics, and I guess to a degree some of it is, you know, you like the first versions of the character you encounter, and for me it was Connor Hawke as Green Arrow, it was Carl Rayner as Green Lantern, it was Wally West as the Flash. I don't really have a lot of time for Barry Allen. I thought Wally was a more interesting character. But again, how much of that is just this was the character of the Flash as was when I first got into comics, and you know, how much of it is actually the character was more interesting, I don't know. But there was some really interesting stuff being done with these characters at the time, and I really enjoyed it. I would say Rock of Ages from the Morrison JLA run still holds up as probably the best dark side story. Just certainly the best modern-ish. I guess 1990s isn't modern anymore, but certainly the best dark side story since Kirby was actually doing the New Gods. But one of the things I really liked, about the JLA, and the DC universe in general, is that it was hopeful. These were, broadly speaking, even shitbags like Oliver Queen were genuinely trying to do good things. They were not, you know, even Batman, the poster child for the grimdark. Even Batman is broadly speaking hopeful or was at the time, you know. These were people who had their hearts in the right place, and they were trying their best, and I just really liked that, and that's why I've steered clear of that's why I've steered completely clear of the Snyder movies. Because I don't want a grimdark Superman. I don't want a grimdark Wonder Woman. I don't really want a grimdark Batman, you know. If I could have any Batman story, you know, if I was able to pick what they did with Batman, we wouldn't get a Dark Knight or a Batman Begins or anything that we've had so far. We wouldn't even get the Keaton style Batman. I mean, I've got a soft spot for the 60s Batman, sure, but it would just be a straight detective story. You know, when you... Certainly at the time I was getting into DC, the tagline for Batman was, you know, the Dark Knight, sure, but the tagline in all the comics, and it goes down to the comics that he originated in, was Batman, world's greatest detective. And that's an aspect that they've not run with on film particularly. They've touched on it, you know, but they've never really run with the idea of Batman, the world's greatest detective, and just done straight up Batman as a noir detective novel, you know, put into film. And that would really work, and I'd really like to see that. I certainly don't want grimdark fucking Superman. Don't get me wrong, there's a time and place for deconstruction of the superhero mythos. You know, even characters like Superman, I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but if you're going to be doing a big budget Superman film and then moving into Superman and Batman and then into the Justice League, one of the key things about Superman and Batman is that they're fucking friends. You know, these are guys who've... And I know this is origin stories and the like, but I didn't like all the death and destruction, the civilian casualties in Snyder's Man of Steel. I didn't like the idea of essentially doing the Superman and Batman fight from Dark Knight Returns in whatever the second one was. If you've got the responsibility for bringing these characters to the screen for the first time in years, you've got to sell people on these characters. And I know it's difficult because the MCU's out there and it's been so successful, and you don't want to do the same thing, but Superman is, or should be, the guy that Captain America aspires to be. And they did pretty well with Captain America in the MCU. And I know it's not super popular to be, you know, to want these lighter heroes, but it's fucking Superman. Of all characters, is he really the one that needs to be grimdark? You know, I just don't get it. C16. And it was something I liked in the Morrison JLA. You know, Morrison looked at the difference between how Superman is perceived and how he perceives himself, and the, you know, there's a scene I want to say the Paradise Lost storyline, where there's a fight between a whole bunch of fallen angels, effectively literal angels from heaven, and the JLA, and the Flash comments that, you know, that Superman is the guy who can't buy into his own, who doesn't buy into his own myth, if you like, can't see his own, doesn't understand why people view him the way he does, and yet he's literally wrestling an angel at the time. And I always thought that was a nice, sort of a nice touch, a nice description of that dichotomy. I don't know. So yeah, what I didn't want was grimdark for the JLA. The JLA is supposed to be hopeful, even if bad things happen. The JLA is supposed to be. These are supposed to be icons you can strive for. These are supposed to be inspirational characters, not you can do the deconstruction stuff later on, but for the introduction, for that first film where you've got the JLA there, for that first film, it should be, you shouldn't be deconstructing something until you've actually presented it in its normal form, in my opinion. And I don't think that people these days have the intimate familiarity with the comics that they did, that they necessarily did even sort of 15 years ago. I don't think maybe in the 90s, the people who'd actually go and see a JLA movie would have been fine with that, but I agree. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Miss Temperance. Superman is an exceptionally difficult character to write well, in a way that people will empathise with, and that's why a lot of people I think why a lot of people like to go down this alien among us thing. But the thing about Superman is he's first and foremost not, he's physically an alien, but he's first and foremost a human by acclimatation and nurture, and that's the strength of the character, I think. And as I say, I think it's always felt like a shortcut to me. Not a shortcut, but a cheap way of trying to make an already interesting character interesting in a way that's easier for the people to write, and that just strikes me as poor writing. I absolutely, if I come across a comics writer who writes Superman well, then if they can write Superman well, they can almost certainly write anybody well. Superman's a really hard needle to thread. Yeah, absolutely, he really is, and I think it particularly in. I think it made things easier in the JLA comics because because all of the characters in the Morrison JLA, they were all turned up to 11 in some ways because it was, you know, they were all turned up to 11 because the Morrison JLA was about the gods walking the earth and saving humanity from itself. You know, that was why that was the allegory that was being played out. That was the metaphor they had. They literally put them on the moon so that they could, in a watchtower, so they could look down upon humanity and be humanity's defenders and protectors. And yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, don't get me wrong, but yeah, it's difficult, and I don't envy anybody trying to write Superman. Or yeah, absolutely. I mean, and therein lies a problem with comics is that these things have to run forever, or at least appear to run forever. Yeah. This is awkward. I'm going to have to do a little bit of work to try and straighten that out at some point. One of my horns is bent. But I guess the advantage of trying to do that in a movie, of course, is that it doesn't have to run forever. Unlike comic books, they could have actually done that in a movie. So yeah, as I say, I don't think I'll ever watch the Justice League Snyder Cut or otherwise. It's not really my bag. And by the same token, it wasn't long after that DC Comics sort of, as I say, started slipping into the Silver Age. They brought back, they made Hal the Spectre, and then they brought him back to life, and fully, and Green Arrow came back to life as well, and then Barry Allen was back, and the characters that I'd enjoyed had got put on the back burner. And I suppose that's what happened to other people when Barry Allen died and Hal Jordan died and the like. But I didn't really have any. I've enjoyed Silver Age stuff, but I don't have the love for the Silver Age that a lot of people seem to. I was perfectly happy with what I was getting. So yeah, you got the Silver Age. Then they retroactively they brought Hal Jordan back, and then they made it not his fault that he went mad in the first place. It was the giant yellow space bug that got in his brain and made him evil. And then we had Rainbow Lanterns and the emotional spectrum, of which very little of the spectrum was actually emotions. And yeah, I just know I could not deal with all of that. It was bad, and I did not want. And then things started getting grim dark, and they did Identity Crisis, and what they did to the Dibneys was awful, and then we had Infinite Crisis, and then we had 52. 52 was okay. I mean, in a vacuum, 52 was pretty good. That year was a pretty good sequence of comics. If you've not read it, 52's actually pretty good. But then it wasn't long after that we got the new 52 reboot, and I wasn't, again, that took away a whole bunch of characters I really liked. Right, I was going to put the split horn on here, the transformable horn, so that we could go from one form to another, but at the moment the bent horn is causing some problems with that, so I'm gonna have to see what I can do to fix that. Yeah, I mean, the Catwoman reboot I was never a fan of, particularly after it had come off a really strong John Ostrander run. I mean, I understand why they felt perhaps that the Jim Balent artistic interpretation of Catwoman was perhaps an aspect of the 90s that they wanted to move away from. What I didn't understand was why Catwoman had to suddenly become Girl Batman instead of an actual interesting character. We already had several Batmans effectively between Batman and Nightwing and the various Robins and Batwoman, and the last thing we needed was one of the few characters in the Batman sort of in the Bat family orbit that wasn't perpetually miserable, to join the circle of misery. I enjoyed the fact that Catwoman was I didn't like some of the origin rejig. I liked that Catwoman was just an exceptionally skilled thief, and she stole because it was fun and she liked it, and that was, and occasionally she stole, occasionally she would do nice things because she was in a position to do so, and they moved away from that, and that just made me sad. As I say, the new 52 then rebooted a whole bunch of characters in ways that I just didn't have any interest in. And that was around the time that I realised that actually the problem was I wasn't really their target audience anymore. And that's fine, I'm not their target audience now, and to be honest, I'm not really sure I should be. And that's probably for the best, They should be... In the same way that I had no interest in Hal Jordan and Barry Allen because I couldn't relate, and in Hal Jordan and Barry Allen and Oliver Queen because I couldn't relate to them. Which was why I liked Wally West and Connor Hawke and Carl Rayner. they should be catering to people who were my age, who are my age, or are the age I was at the time. You know, they should be providing versions of these heroes that are that actually represent the the readers of today. You know, I things move on, and I can still go back and reread the Morrison JLA and enjoy it, you know. At the end of the day, and I think this is something I hope they've learned, because it felt like the things that drove me out, at least initially, the return to the Silver Age stuff were the people were writers who were of an age that those Silver Age characters were their versions of the heroes. You know, these were people who'd grown up with Hal and Barry and Ollie and the like, and had been grumpy at the time that they'd been killed off, and now they were in a position to write the stories that brought them back. And I guess that's fine, but it's still moving backwards, and really what they needed to do was move forwards, and rather than bringing back what they enjoyed when they were young, DC had got it right once. They'd taken these characters that were out of date, they killed them off, they'd brought in characters that more reflected that were more accessible to their target audience, to bring new readers in, you know. They got it right once, and they got scared by it, and then they reversed it, and I think that was the wrong decision. I think they should have just kept it up. It's one of the things that DC has over Marvel, is that legacy heroes, you know, that generational passing of the baton. You've got, with the exception of sort of, I guess, the really big names of sort of Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, but even Batman has been, you know, Dick Grayson has periodically been Batman, and people grow up in the DC universe, or they used to, you know, people age. Robin became Nightwing, another Robin died, another Robin became Red Robin, and everybody grew up, and I always thought that was good, and then they just went to turning back the clock. But hey, it is what it is. I am not a DC Comics exec, which is probably for the best. As I say, I think they should be writing for the people they want to be reading the people who they want to be reading the comic in the future, you know. And those people probably don't want to be reading about authoritarian white men. Gonna hazard a guess, you know, that that's not a thing that flies these days. What I do need to reread is I got for Christmas the first volume of the Absolute Edition of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing from the 80s. The series where he created John Constantine and brought in the concept of the Green to the DCU, and if you want to, I guess, something of a deconstruction of superheroes, that's a series to read. I mean, just any Alan Moore is probably good for that. But it's got some cool mythological stuff in it. It's got some great characters. I mean, bear in mind that it's the 80s. Some things won't have aged well. Though being Alan Moore and not Frank Miller, there's fewer things that have aged poorly than you might expect. I mean, I guess everybody's got to read The Dark Knight Returns once and go, yeah, that was interesting, but it's been done better since. And you know, Frank Miller's got some tendencies to him, which, you know, don't hold up in this day and age. So this goes on. There, like that. Excellent. Yeah, as I say, weird. The older I've got, the less tolerant I've become of grimdark things. At least things that are grimdark for grimdark's sake, you know. So yeah, that'll be. I mean, don't get me wrong. Swamp Thing is a horror comic. It's got a lot of dark stuff in it, but it's not grimdark for grimdark's sake. There's a lot of humanity, and again, there's a lot of hope in that comic, and that's a good thing. I have not. It is on my list of things I want to see. I've heard very good things about the Swamp Thing TV series, and I would very much like to see what they've done with it. I mean, obviously they weren't able to have John Constantine in it, to my knowledge, but yeah, I would very much like to see that at some point. I think it only got the one series in the end. I don't think it got renewed, sadly. I've heard good things about the Doom Patrol TV series as well, which only half a series. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. Sad, but Doom Patrol I think's made it a couple of seasons though, and I did love me the Grant Morrison Doom Patrol. And I've heard fairly positive things about the I've heard pretty positive things about the TV series, so I will be very excited to watch that at some point. Series 3, oh, that's good news. That's got the Daltonator in it. As Dr. Niles Calder, which is excellent casting in my mind. Be interested to see just how much of the weird shit from the Morrison run has made it into that series. I know some of it has, from what I understand. Speaking of Morrison, it's never going to happen, but I would love to see a TV series of The Invisibles. I haven't reread it for a long while, and I don't know how well it holds up. It felt revolutionary at the time when I first read it. Whether it still feels that way now on a reread would be an interesting question to answer. But seeing King Mob in real life would be very satisfying, I think. So there we go. One head. You can just about see the eyes peeking through there. This is going to look really good, I think, once it's been panel lined. I think panel lining is going to make a huge difference to this. So yeah, we'll see what that looks like after I've finished. But for the moment, it gets to have bits fall off it. For the moment, it gets to go on the body like so. Right, it's 20 past 8. We've been going for an hour and a quarter. Gonna go for a break, and I'll be back about 5 minutes. Everybody take it easy. Welcome back. I'm Alex Tremaine, old man that builds Gundam and rants apparently about comics that nobody but me cares about. Before the break we finished the head on this full armour unicorn master grade Gundam. It's come out pretty nicely. There was a minor issue with the transformable split horns, in that one of them came out of the bag bent. So I'll see if I can work out a way to straighten that, maybe warm it up a little bit with a hairdryer, see if I can just get it straight. But in the meantime I've gone with the single piece horn, and as with the torso, I will try to get the panel lining for everything that gets done today. It probably won't happen before Thursday's stream, but I'll probably get the panel lining done over the weekend for whatever we do today and on Thursday. So yeah, let's get back to it. If you're new to the stream and you're enjoying an old man ranting about comics while building Gundams, then I would be eternally grateful if you would tap the follow button, but don't feel you have to. Right, onwards, armwards apparently. Have I got sprue J out? Apparently not. Let's see if we can find sprue J, which will be a grey sprue of some variety. J and L. Are we going to need L? Doesn't look like it, no, but we are going to need E, of which there are two. Sprues E. Right, so put H out of the way because it seems to be, I'm going to get C out of the way as well, because these are all waste units. Parts. So hang that up there. Right. So let's get to it. Onwards with the right arm. So J 12, 14, 16 and 20. J So while we're talking comic book series, I guess they're doing a few more recommendations. It's not the worst thing in the world. So in no particular order, from Marvel, God, what was it called? Journey into Mystery. The young Loki storyline, which I think was a Kieran Gillen story. This is going to be a relevant name just in general. A story about Loki transforming himself into a young version of Loki. And getting up to wacky hijinks, and I will leave it at that because there's a lot more to it, and really going into any of it in any detail. It's Journey into Mystery is the name of the book. It's a mystery, and the mystery is why Loki did that to himself. And the solution, the answer, is kind of interesting. So yeah, that's a fun one. Also by Kieran Gillen. In fact, let's get all of the Kieran Gillen stuff out of the way. Also by Kieran Gillen from Marvel, the Kieran Gillen run on Young Avengers, which ties into the Young Loki run on Journey into Mystery. So read one, then read the other. It's really good. It's the Young Avengers. It's just a really good run. It's a few years old now, I guess. Early 2010s, I think that was coming out. Can't remember exactly. Still with Kieran Gillen as writer, but not with either of the big two as publisher. Kieran Gillen's run on Kieran Gillen's, God, what's it called? The Wicked and the Divine. Gods, and yeah, people becoming gods, but then they only live for 2 years once they become gods, and then they die, and nobody knows why. It sounds a bit silly, but it's really, really interesting. Again, it's a bit of a mystery story. The whys and wherefores are the hook in that. It's a good one. Also continuing with Mr. Gillen, Phonogram, set in what was, when it was written, modern day UK. It's a few years old now, I guess. So it may have dated a little bit, but it's still good, and it's about people who literally cast magic using music, or rather people who use music to engage with magic in various different ways. It's really good. It's really interesting. Again, not gonna go too deep on it, but it's a good story, well worth reading. What else have we got? Things that are worth reading. From DC Comics, Secret Six, villains with hearts of, something. Villains with hearts, at least. Characters that would be, not A-list villains as we'd think of them, with the exception of perhaps Bane, who's one of the team members. There's broadly speaking, I guess, two runs on this. There was a pre New 52 Secret Six, and there was a New 52 Secret Six. I read one but not the other. I would be shocked to find that the New 52 Secret Six was not good. I just didn't have any interest in the New 52, nor do I have any interest in it at all. So, take that for what it's worth. I would look at either or both. Certainly, I would recommend starting with the earlier series, if only to get context. I don't imagine that starting with the New 52 version would be harmful. I suspect, like most things with the New 52, it was a complete fresh start with introductions to characters, but yeah. If you can stomach the New 52 just in general, then it's probably worth a read. Weird shit. I mean, read anything Grant Morrison's written, I guess. I haven't read much of his more recent superhero comic output because it's been largely for DC Comics, and I don't read that anymore. But it's probably good, and I can definitely recommend all his old Doom Patrol run. I can definitely recommend the Invisibles. If you can lay your hand on it, his Zenith series for 2000 AD was excellent. That's been, I believe that's available these days. It was in Wright's hell at one point, as I understand it, but I think Rebellion have the ability to print it again now. So if you've not read Zenith, then it's a hell of a read, and I would recommend having a look at it. I mean, with a heavy heart and the caveat that Warren Ellis turned out to be a scumbag, basically anything Warren Ellis has written has been good, but it all comes with that heavy caveat that Warren Ellis turned out to be a scumbag. Your mileage may vary on how that works for you, but I guess Transmetropolitan, The Authority, Planetary. I mean, if you're gonna read anything, read Planetary. Alan Moore, obviously, just read stuff by Alan Moore. If you like horror, then, as mentioned previously, his run on Swamp Thing is pretty well up there with some of the best horror comics of all time. If you like superheroes, then I guess there's Watchmen. If the whole world is making you uncomfortable right now, particularly the UK, then I guess V for Vendetta is a thing to have a look at. Some of Alan Moore's later stuff from the 2000s is very good. I would recommend Top 10, which is about police officers in a world where everybody is superheroes, or rather everybody has superpowers. That's a good series. Promethea is another good one for Alan Moore. Neil Gaiman, obviously, Sandman, etc., everything related to it. You may or may not, it was a blink and you miss it affair, but in is this right? Yes, it must be. It was a blink and you miss it affair, but there is a mini-series, and hey, I guess this is like Young Avengers, which I suspect is going to become relevant to the Marvel Cinematic Universe at some point soon. I'd be shocked if the Neil Gaiman run on the Eternals didn't turn out to be relevant to the Marvel Cinematic Universe at some point in the not tremendously distant future. So, yeah, Neil Gaiman's run on the Eternals. Have a look at that. What else? Mark Waid's run on The Flash, which is Wally West era Flash, is really good. Strongly recommend that. I mean, Mark Waid in general is very good. He's done a lot of really good stories, but that's a good one. For those who may be young enough to not realise that the TV series aren't the original incarnation of the the origin of the name of the team. Young Justice from late 90s, early 2000s. It was being written by Peter David at the time. There's about, I don't know, 50 issues of it. Comixology is probably your best bet for getting a hold of it these days. I don't think it was something that, I think there was only one trade paperback of it. Which clearly didn't sell well enough at the time. But yeah, Young Justice by Peter David. It's Junior JLA, effectively, but a more sort of early 2000s take on it than, for example, the Teen Titans. Or Titans as it was then. The Titans had essentially grown up at that point to fill the sort of what's the word I'm looking for? The Titans had sort of hit that young adult, I guess, is the best descriptor. What had been the Teen Titans were now the 20-something Titans, and they created Young Justice to fill the gap, and it was literally Superboy, Robin, Wonder Girl, the then Wonder Girl, Impulse, who was the junior speedster at the time, as a Kid Flash alike. Along with Arrowette as the Green Arrow equivalent, and then some newly created characters for the series that filled in. I won't go into, on the off chance that anybody takes this recommendation and decides they want to read it, I won't go into any more details because some of it is spoiler territory, I guess. But yeah, it's worth a read. That was really good. I mean, Peter David just in general is really good. He did an excellent run on Aquaman, if memory serves, around the same time, which I guess is another thing to go on the list. What else? We already discussed the Morrison JLA, I guess. It's worth having a look through the JLA Classified series, which was a sort of spin-off, I guess, of the JLA that ran. There we go. Yeah, that's had this problem on the last one. Okay. So what's causing that issue? Yeah, JLA Classified was around the same time as the Morrison JLA, but it was rotating authors doing sort of short 2 or 3 issue storylines to effectively as a supplement to the main book, and there was some good stuff in there. Again, obviously with the previous Warren Ellis caveat, but there was a very good Warren Ellis story. Which again, Warren Ellis caveat. But there were a few others as well. It was a really good series. Obviously, with rotating authors, some episodes better than others, but most of them were pretty good. If you're interested in proper dodgy 90s comics, then there's always Johnny the Homicidal Maniac by Yonan Vasquez of Invader Zim fame. Haven't read that in a while. Not sure how well that will have aged. But yeah, it's worth a look. What else? I mean, if you've never read it and have only heard about it, there is some... I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not a good cohesive story, but I think there is value in reading Crisis on the Crisis on Infinite Earths collection. There is a trade paperback that collects most of the important sections of Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's not everything by any stretch of the imagination, but it's pretty good. No, it's pretty interesting. It's an interesting look at what DC were trying to do to modernise themselves at the time. Yeah, I mean, have a look at it. It's interesting, at least, even if not necessarily actually good. Thinking about Mark Waid though, as we were earlier. His Kingdom Come graphic novel is a with art by Alex Ross, is a thing to behold. I would strongly recommend having a read of that. It is both a good looking book and an excellent story. Another Morrison recommendation, a spring back to the 90s. Flex Mentallo Man of Muscle Mystery is a psychedelic trip and a half. You don't really need any more information than that. The name will either sell you on it or it won't. It's really good though. It's art by Frank Quitely, I think, who I know is very Marmite artist. I've never encountered anybody who doesn't have an opinion on him, at least. I think Quitely's art is very situational. I think there's things it works for and things it doesn't. There's some artists who can draw any story and their art will work. Jamie McKelvey, I think would fit in that category. I don't think that there's anything that McKelvey's art wouldn't work for, where his art wouldn't be at least good. There's and there's a few others like that who you know, There's never going to be a situation where you're going to regret using them. Quietly's different. There will absolutely be situations where Quietly's art doesn't work in the context of the story. But when it does work, like in Flex Mentallo Man of Muscle Mystery, boy does it work. So yeah, there you go. Give that a shot. G15. Where's G? G. Let's see all. G15. I guess while we're talking about sort of interesting and important comics, I guess if you've never had the opportunity to do so, Nightfall, the Batman story where Batman gets his back broken, which was a big thing in the 90s. It's worth reading the comic. There's a trade paperback, 3 trade paperbacks I think it's 3 parts or 2 parts, I think it's Nightfall 1 and 2 and then Knight's Quest maybe, but it's worth, yeah, like things like Crisis on Infinite Earths and 0 Hour and other similar big DC crossover events. They're worth reading as a historical artifact, and for the influence that they had on things that came after them. It's yeah, Nightfall. There's a thing to have a look at for you. What else? The Birds of Prey. Particularly the Gail Simone run on Birds of Prey, but I mean, the Chuck Dixon run isn't awful, but I would blame no one for starting just with the Gail Simone run. It's really good, you know, it really cemented Gail Simone as one of my favourite writers. There's some really interesting characters that she creates as part of that. She clearly has a deep love for the characters that she's writing. Yeah, Birds of Prey. With regard to things that are more present in the cultural zeitgeist, or at least relatively recent things connected to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if you enjoyed yourself some Guardians of the Galaxy, then I would suggest finding the Dan Abnett run on Guardians of the Galaxy, which is where a lot of inspiration was drawn from for the movies. That's a thing worth reading. I wouldn't bother with the Bendis run, but the Abnett run is excellent. What else? Going back to Peter David, he did a run on Marvel's version of Captain Marvel, given both DC and Marvel had their own Captain Marvels at the time. DC have renamed their Captain Marvel to Shazam these days, but at this point he was still they were still having that argument. DC with the benefit of having age of the character on their side, in that the DC Captain Marvel had been named Captain Marvel for somewhat longer. Or rather, was the DC's Captain Marvel was an older character than Marvel's Captain Marvel, any of them. But Marvel, with the benefit of being the company called Marvel and wanting Captain Marvel to be Marvel, in the end I think Marvel won out because I think DC gave in because Marvel's Captain Marvel became the more popular property. And I would imagine DC didn't want, not that there's ever really been any confusing them, but DC didn't want any association, I suspect, between the two properties, so they renamed the DC Captain Marvel to be, which was originally a Fawcett Comics character, I want to say. They renamed poor Billy Batson as Shazam, and that was probably the right call, because Carol Danvers had definitely become the Captain Marvel by that point, and whether she was the original Captain Marvel or not, she was the Captain Marvel that everybody knew was Captain Marvel, and to a degree that's all you need. What am I doing? Why is this not? Yeah, there it is. Look at that. It's not sitting 100% right, but we can fix that up later. Anyway, before I went off on the Captain Marvel digression, Peter David did a run on Captain Marvel, one of the Marvel Captain Marvels, not the current Marvel Captain Marvel, not the Carol Danvers Captain Marvel, but the Janice Vell Captain Marvel, who is one of the original Captain Marvel of the Marvel versions, Marvel. One of his children, I believe. I think he's one of Marvel's kids. And Peter David did a run on that where Janice Vell, Captain Marvel at the time, touched the power cosmic, perceived the entire universe, and promptly went batshit insane, and then spent quite a few storylines just wandering around the Marvel universe, batshit insane, causing untold havoc. It's great fun, really is worth a read. What else have we got? Gail Simone again. Gail Simone did a run on Deadpool. She also did a run. She also did a short-lived series called Agent X. And both of those are really worth reading. Absolutely hilarious. Yeah, give those a read. There was an Avengers series by Kelly Sue DeConnick. I mean, just read anything by Kelly Sue DeConnick, she's really good. But there was an Avengers series by Kelly Sue DeConnick. I want to say it was Avengers Assemble, maybe? There were so many Avengers titles at one point. Anyway, have a look for Avengers comics by Kelly Sue DeConnick and any other comics that she's written, really. And read them. They're really good. Going back to early 2000s mega crossovers, this time in Marvel, there was an enormous crossover at one point that everybody was raving about, called Civil War. Don't read Civil War, it's bullshit. At the same time, however, there was an actually good crossover happening called Annihilation, which was using all of the characters that weren't in Civil War, all of the Marvel's cosmic characters, everybody who was not on Earth, and it was literally a fight to protect the entire galaxy. It was like a cosmic level universe ending threat, and it was really fucking good. And then everybody got home from that to find out what had been going on in Civil War, and they were like, fuck is wrong with you all? This is really what you're giving a shit about. We just saved the entire universe, and you're bullshitting about a Superhuman Registration Act. Nah, mate. You can get into the fucking sea. So yeah, read Annihilation and all its many bits. The Nova series with Richard Rider as the lead character, which I want to say is a Dan Abnett story, but I'm not 100%. That's really good too. But as I say, don't read Civil War. It was shit. They had to spend so much time rehabilitating their characters after that. Man, did they fuck Reed Richards and Tony Stark up in that series. From a viability of characters perspective. Complete character assassination on both of them, particularly Reed Richards. But yeah, if you've ever watched Avengers, the Captain America Civil War stuff, and thought maybe I should read the comics that this is based on, don't. They're bad. They're awful. You do not need that kind of bullshit in your life. Is what it comes down to. want, if you're after a giggle and you're willing to put up with terrible comics, and speaking of comics that are an artifact of times past, then did you know that Marvel and DC did a crossover at one point? Well, they did crossovers at several points, but on one occasion they did a thing called the Amalgam Age of Comics, where the Marvel and DC universes collided and merged into one, and characters got... Well, it started out as Marvel versus DC, where various characters from each universe were chosen to fight each other, so you got, or were forced to fight each other by some cosmic being. So you had things like Batman versus Captain America and Lobo versus Wolverine, of all things, and what other abominations did they do? Storm versus Wonder Woman. That was a thing that happened. So we're looking at 3, 5, 6 and 7. Where was I here? Storm versus Wonder Woman, Robin versus Jubilee, The Flash versus Quicksilver, Superman versus Thor, Green Lantern versus Silver Surfer, I think. And a bunch of others, and the results were fan voted. So you voted for what the results of these fights were going to be, which meant that you got weird fucking shit like Wolverine beating Lobo in a fight. Like I say, weird fucking shit. Sorry, Superman versus the Hulk, not Superman versus Thor. I can't remember who Thor fought. He did fight somebody, I'm fairly certain. You got the delightful moment of Wonder Woman wielding Thor's hammer, which actually was pretty fucking cool. Which was her consolation prize for somehow losing to Storm. Namor versus Aquaman. There's another one for you. But as I say, these were all fan voted for, like when Robin died. So as I say, it meant that you got some really weird shit like Lobo losing to Wolverine. Spider-Man versus Superboy, that was kind of interesting. As I say, it was just a dumb marketing thing, you know. It was DC versus Marvel, worlds collide, blah. Who will survive? But it was the fun kind of dumb. If you ever see a copy, grab it. It's quite silly. But it was followed up by the Amalgam Age of Comics, which was after the fights where everybody voted for things. There was a there was a follow-up where various characters from each universe ended up merged into weird combinations. So you got things like Doctor Strange Fate, who was a combination of Doctor Strange and Doctor Fate. You got a, in full-on 90s geek frenzy, you got an amalgam of Batman and Wolverine, who I think was called, I want to say was called Dark Claw. You got a combination of Iron Man and Green Lantern called Iron Lantern, which was interesting. I mean, don't get me wrong, none of these were good. They were all objectively bad, but it's dumb as fuck, and it's worth a look if you can find them. Nobody's going to charge real money for them. They're terrible. If you find one in a in the future when you can go into thrift shops again, I have no doubt that you'll be able to find these for pennies. I cannot imagine that they are collector's items. I cannot imagine that anybody gives a shit about them. But they are dumb as fuck and very funny. So yeah. Marvel versus DC and the amalgam age of comics. Somebody in each of these companies thought that this was a good idea and thought that fan voting was a good idea. And I'm fairly certain this was after the Jason Todd debacle. So, by this point they should have known better about fan voting. They should have known better. But they didn't, and they did it anyway. So, there you go. There's a thing to fill you with horror for a little while. As a concept. G3. I tell you what, I bought some shit comics in the 90s and early 2000s. I just bought anything that looked good, and many of them looked good and were absolutely not. I have a shelf full of terrible shit. I have a lot of really good stuff too, but I have several shelves worth of terrible shit. But yeah, if you ever want to see Namor being defeated by a killer whale landing on him, Marvel vs DC. That's the ticket for you. Namor defeated by a killer whale landing on him. J1, there it is. I mean, I don't want you to think that all comics in the 90s were terrible. There was some really good stuff, but boy did they do some shit. So we go. And then we need J9 and 10. To do 9. There's 9. J9. And 10. That way round. Is that properly connected? Yes. Then we need E15, which is that one. Shitty Popu, thank you for the raid. That's very kind of you. I'm Alex Tremaine. I'm an old man that builds Gundam and rants about old pop culture from when I was young and spry. today we have been talking about terrible 90s comics. And good 90s comics and early 2000s comics, but been talking a lot about utterly terrible comics. Thank you for the follow. We have most recently been discussing Marvel vs. DC, the comics crossover event that never should have happened, followed up by the Amalgam Age of Comics, which gave us such wonderful things as the Batman Wolverine unholy combination that was known as Dark Claw. If memory serves, it was awful. They let people vote on who was going to win the fights between the two companies. Oh yeah, they really did. So the popular characters won. Yeah, there's a few of us Gunpla builders going around the place. Which unicorn are you building? Or did you finish? That way, and in the top. There we go. Right. Oh, I haven't gone as far as painting any. I did make the I have built the real grade full armor, which I really enjoyed. Really nice kit. Panel lined this one. Still haven't put all of the decals on, but I'm in the process. I have the rest of the armor is up on a shelf, but yeah, I'm currently. This is the master grade full armor, which I'm interested in seeing where the differences lie between the two kits. So yeah, today we've built the come on, focus. We've built the head and the right arm, which for ooh, well, that's reassuring, isn't it? Put that back on. There we go. No shoulder unit yet, but yeah, coming along quite nicely. HGs are great. I've not built. I built a few HGs in the 90s, and then I didn't build any Gunpla until just after Christmas when I did the unicorn. And since doing the unicorn, I've just been totally sucked in by building Gunpla. So this was just after Christmas. Since then, I've built the where are we here? Right, so that's a perfect grade Zeta Gundam, which was a fantastically fun build. That is the perfect grade Strike Rouge, and the first on-screen build was this real grade new, which I also got the HWS kit for, which looks really fucking good, I've got to be honest. I think this is a fantastic kit. I would strongly recommend looking at some of the real grades. The new is great. The real grade unicorns are great. They have complexity above the high grade without being massively expensive like the perfect grades. Certainly, I wouldn't be afraid of going up to the higher grades. There's no difference. In fact, what I would say is that the master grade and the perfect grade, because the parts are physically bigger, they're actually easier to manipulate in a lot of ways, and there's just less tiny fiddly bits because everything is just on a larger scale in the first one. This was the Banshee. This is the master grade Banshee, which seems to be very similar to the master grade unicorn that I'm currently building. Though this is the regular version, not the Ver.Ka. So there is some difference in the proportions. It's yeah, I have been somewhat sucked into things. As I say, I've got this master grade unicorn, which is the full armour version, so it's the green frame and it's got all of the ridiculous bits and pieces to go with it. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this comes out in comparison to the real grade unicorn. And then once I finish this, I have a perfect grade Strike Freedom on the floor over here in a box, which is going to be the next on-stream build. And I'm sure by the time I've got there, well, it's payday tomorrow, so I suspect there's going to be more. More Gunpla waiting in boxes to be built in the meantime. Oh, I've also got. Yeah, I can believe that the Strike Freedom is just a good-looking kit. In all the scales I've seen, and I like there's a lot of contrast to the coloured parts. I think that really works well for it. I've seen a lot of really good kits. I also have in the backlog to be built, I have this Resel Type C, but this one is probably this is to keep me busy off stream. Keeps me out of trouble if I've got something to build. So the if you're interested in the new build, which was the one I just with the heavy weapon expansion kit, there's a link to my YouTube channel in the Twitch channel description, which has a playlist of that entire build, if you're really bored. But yeah, thanks for the raid, I really appreciate it. It's nice to see other people who are building Gunpla. Sadly, you've caught me at the end of the stream. It's 10 o'clock here, and I've got work tomorrow. So I'm afraid, given I just finished an arm, I'm going to be wrapping up here. But yeah, it's I stream Tuesdays and Thursdays, same time slot, 7 till 10 UK time. So yeah, if anyone's interested, then come along and join. As I say, this build will be entirely on stream. I'll be doing some panel lining off stream, but that's the extent of it. All of the build will be here, and streams will be uploaded to the YouTube channel as and when during the week. So yeah, thanks for the company, appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. If anyone's interested in keeping up, then please give me a follow. I would be most grateful, but as always, don't feel you have to. It's not an obligation. Yeah, hopefully I'll see some of you later in the week, or this time next week. Have a fantastic evening, everybody, and I will see you in the future.